Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, Wednesday, May 29th, 2019. And today we have something kind of special to kind of celebrate, and that is the release of MuseScore 3.1. I mean, I know we've been having a lot of releases. We've been doing 3.0, 301, 302, 304, 305, etc. The 301, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are considered minor releases. They just basically were bug fixes, maybe a little tweak here and there. 3.1 is a fairly major release. Some people have said, it's significant enough that we could have called it MuseScore 4 if we had wanted to, but there's no real reason to. It's still largely the same. It just really fixes a lot of things and introduces a lot of really nice improvements. So I'm just going to give you a brief tour if you've been following along with these. By the way, my name is Marc Sabatella. I'm the Director of Education for MuseScore. I'm also one of the developers, and I will say that I was really heavily involved in a lot of the things that I'm going to be showing you. I did a lot of the development for some of this. So anyhow, if you've been following these cafes, you've probably seen me demonstrate some of these features before while we are working on them, and they're everything I've shown is in here now, as well as a couple other things. So I'm just going to give like a brief tour of some of the highlights. So the big thing that was one of the main reasons why we bumped up to 3.1 rather than calling this 3.06 or something is there's a fairly significant change now to how we handle dynamics and how we handle crescendos and things in particular, where it used to be all during playback. It used to be if you had a passage like this, then each note would get louder than the last, but this note would either be loud or soft. You couldn't change dynamic in the middle of the note. So things like this, a fortepiano followed by a crescendo, just weren't possible. 3.1 it is. So here's what this sounds like. So there you have it. Single note dynamics is the name of this feature, and you don't have to do anything special at all to enable it. It's just there, so your scores should work with it by default. So if you already have scores where you've entered these sorts of dynamics, they'll just start working, and if you've been holding off on doing that because you knew it wouldn't play back, well, you don't have to hold off anymore. It works. As far as things that you could do, there's some customizations available if you're into tinkering with sound fonts and so forth. There's different MIDI controllers that are used, and so there's some options and things that you can learn about for that. Also, I should point out that I customized one thing here. The playback of these particular crescendos was a little more gradual than I wanted. It didn't really have the shape of the fortepiano that I wanted. So I changed it from the default linear curve here. Oh, you can't see me because you're seeing my face, right? Yep. So let's go full screen because we're gonna want that. Bye. So dynamics method here, exponential. That's what gave the effect just a little more of a weighted at the end, I guess, effect. If I had set those to linear, the effect isn't as well. It's just a more gradual crescendo, but that's not really what I wanted. That's single note dynamics for you. So I'm just going to give you a brief tour of these things so I don't get too hung up on any one single feature. So I'm just going to move on then to talk about the next thing, which is something I showed you a couple weeks ago, having to do with automatic placement. Automatic placement was new with MuseScore 3, and it's what enabled this score to look like this, rather than how it looked in MuseScore 2, which I forgot to load it, sorry. Automatic placement. I think if I load the music XML, that'll be good. Okay. This is a different version. Oh well. Yeah, so never mind that. I can show you what it would have looked like in MuseScore 2 because we now have a command to disable automatic placement. People People have asked for such a command, and we've had our reasons for not really wanting to make it too easy to disable it, because it really does a lot of really good things for you, and we would really like people to learn how to use it more effectively. But if you go to where I just went, edit, so let me do this again, edit, preferences, shortcuts, and then I just searched for auto in here, and you can see there's now a toggle automatic placement for selected elements has a default shortcut of equals, the equal sign, and I'm about to define a shortcut to disable it globally, and I'm going to make it the tilde, because that's something I can reach that I won't hit accidentally too often. All right, so what would this score have looked like? Ah! Oh, Lordy. Okay. So, yes, that is a crash. And I don't know why that happened, but it did. So let's try that again. I'll go back to MuseScore, and I will see if it will let me. That was a crash just defining the shortcut. I didn't even execute the command. I just defined the shortcut. So I don't even know what that's about. The joys of live TV, as they say. Okay, so I was in here. So I had attempted to define a command to disable automatic placement. Let's see if it worked. Tilde. Looks like not. Looks like it crashed before it had a chance to define that shortcut. So let's try it again. If it doesn't work, I'm going to give up. Define. Does it not like tilde for some reason? We'll find out. It was a fluke. So here's what this looks like without automatic placement. I just hit the tilde key, and you see these collisions all over the place. This really is exactly how this would have looked in MuseScore 2. It really kind of is worth me finding the right version of that thing. I guess it's automatic placement AB. Yeah, there it is. So here's what that score looks like in MuseScore 2. And you see it's got all those basically same collisions all over the place. So MuseScore 3, I just hit that tilde key and it turned off automatic placement. It looks just as ugly, but look at all the things it was doing for me. I'll turn it back on. And now you can see all the things it was doing for me. So we really don't want you to turn it off. However, there's times we recognize you might need to disable it, you know, just for individual elements. And we've always allowed that just by going to the inspector and unchecking automatic placement over here. So if I uncheck automatic placement for the tempo marking, it goes back to its default location. And one of the things that we've done now is make that easier. So you just press the equal sign, and that disables automatic placement. But that wasn't good enough. People were requesting, well, we don't really want to have to disable it all. We want it to still do its job. We just want to be able to be a little more flexible with it. Like if I want to be able to take this to coda sign, or if I want to take, you know, this to coda and move it above the volta and move the volta down, I should be allowed to. Or if I want to you know, just change the order of things. So that's basically what we did. I spent quite a while working on this and got it. So now all I have to do is take this guy and drag it, put it wherever I want. In MuseScore 3, that would not have worked. Automatic placement would have gotten in your way. It would have said, no, sorry, you can't do that. In 3.0. In 3.1, that's no longer the case. So automatic placement puts it in a good place by default. But if you don't like it, you can just start moving it. Now I'm using the cursor keys, and you see the same thing. Or Control down moves it in bigger chunks. So let me reset it again. So basically, you can move things now more or less where you want without having to worry so much about automatic placement getting in your way. And if there's times when it still is, you can just press the equal sign or use the automatic placement checkbox to turn it off. One of the specific things that's really nice here is like for fingerings. If I want to move a fingering onto the staff or a string number indication, automatic placement is still enabled. In other words, it's still, notice how it created that extra space for me. Right? It was this much space between those notes. I moved my string number in there. Now there's more space. And as I'm moving these things, these guys are coming down. If I want to move this text in here, I can. It doesn't complain. If I want to move it all the way below the staff, I can. And notice it actually it detected that I did that. Let me put it back above, and you'll see now it says above. And when I move it below, it's now below. And that's nice because if I change my mind, then I can press X and flip it above, because X is normally the key for flipping things above and below. And also, another thing I would show you is, like if I move these two texts together, this text these are still, automatic placement is still enabled for these. So if I then move this text up, the other ones continue to stay out of its way. Or, more to the point, if I raise the pitch of this note, the text continues to move out of the way. So automatic placement is still enabled. It's just allowing me to do things that it wouldn't otherwise do. You know, I can put, change the order of things. If I want to move this rehearsal mark under the volta, I can, etc. So that's what automatic placement has going for it now. One of the other new features was a half and double time thing that there's been plugins written for this over the years that have never really done the job completely, but people often want to do things where they write music and then decide, I really should have written this where instead of these being quarter notes, these should have been eighth notes, and then these eighth notes should have been sixteenths, etc. So you can do that now. You can select any region of your piece or the whole piece if you want, copy it, and then use, under the Edit menu, paste half duration, paste double duration. Half duration is going to half it. There you go. Now it's all, those quarter notes are all eighth notes. So again, here was the original. And if I select that, copy, and then the shortcut is Control-Shift-Q, by the way. And now, right, and I could undo that. And now I could do Control-Shift-W to double it. And so on. So those two commands to half and double the durations of things, it works it's fairly sophisticated. It handles multiple voices. As you can see here, there were multiple voices involved right there. It'll handle triplets. Like if I select this passage here, copy it, and then half time it, then those quarter note triplets became eighth note triplets, etc. It still won't let me have triplets across a bar, so if I try to double the length of this, well, that's not going to work because that triplet won't fit in a 3/4 measure. If it was a 4/4 measure, it would. So actually, if I select this and go over here and double duration, now I get half note triplets, so that works. So it handles triplets, it handles multiple voices, it handles lyrics, slurs, pretty much everything you'd need it to handle. What it doesn't do is rewrite the structure of your piece, where your key signatures are, where your time signature changes are, etc. It's basically copy and paste. So it has the same advantages and disadvantages of copy and paste. It's just copy and paste that's kind of filtered to half time or double time as it pastes. So that's exactly what it does. It's literally like a dozen lines of code that just operates on the paste command to half time or double time every duration as it pastes. So another new feature, well, it's not exactly a new feature, but it's a greatly improved feature, has to do with fretboard diagrams. And for fretboard diagrams, we've always supported these, and we've supported chord symbols, but what's new now is if you add a fretboard diagram to your score, I guess I should have put it on the top staff, but you can see it added the chord symbol with it. So let me do that again, make sure I select the top staff and add there. So it adds the chord symbol with it, and they're now kind of attached, and they know about each other. So if I delete one, the other one goes away also. Move one, the other one moves, etc. So that now they're kind of joined at the hip. You can edit this and make it say, you know, C6 if you want. Not that this is a C6 chord. You can still use, you know, manual adjustments to move this thing if you don't want it to be directly above it. So they're not like totally joined at the hip, as I think I started to say, but they're well associated now. So that's one thing that's new. And then if you add if you create your own fretboard diagram, you can add a chord symbol to it. Just select the chord symbol and select the fretboard diagram, type Control K to add a chord symbol, and it adds it to your fretboard diagram. The ones on the palette all have chords already. So that's B7. Actually, I should put the right chord. That's a B minor chord. B minor. Okay, so some of the other new things here in the inspector, you'll see that there's some additional settings and controls versus how it was in MuseScore 3. I don't have MuseScore 3 installed anymore. I replaced it with 3.1, so I can't quite show you exactly the controls that are different. Just there are some new controls here, and a lot of things that just didn't really work right with fretboard diagrams. The same person, James Thistlewood, who implemented the single note dynamics, also implemented most of the fretboard stuff. So the automatic placement improvements and the paste half and double time were improvements I made, and then lots of other improvements made by other people as well. But James did a lot of really good work here. So one of the other improvements I just showed last week, it was still experimental, but it's in now. Was it last week? I think it was last week. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. And that's continuous view. It was last week. So if I put this score that I'm working on in continuous view, this isn't a huge score. It's only like 100-something measures. It's for a big band, so it's got 17 instruments, 100-something measures. In MuseScore 3.0, this might have been a little bit slow to work with in continuous view, but in MuseScore 3.1, when I press a key, you see it responds instantly. So continuous view was definitely slower than page view in MuseScore 3, because page view had all these really nice improvements that Werner Schwer, the original developer of MuseScore, had implemented these great improvements in how page view works, so that when you make a change, it doesn't have to recalculate the positions of everything in the whole score, only the line of music that changed. But continuous view is one long line of music, so we were still having to recompute everything. But all the data structures, all the information was there to let me just go in and just deal with the measure that changed, and then just do, realize the other things didn't really change. They just maybe moved over a little to the left. And so I was able to take advantage of that and make continuous view operate now just as fast as page view. So, or almost as fast anyhow. So that's another really nice improvement in continuous view. I think overall you'll find it also just works a little better. There's some other performance improvements where, like, when you hit the playback button, it no longer has to stop and recalculate all the information for playback for your entire score. So if you have a large score, you don't have to wait for it to start playing back. That's also more instant now. And then there's some glitches that were solved along the way. So those are some of the improvements that you can look forward to. When I say look forward to, I mean you don't have to wait. This is all available right now. MuseScore 3.1 was released yesterday. So if you go to let's see, I'll go to the home page here because I know it's there on the home page. Oh, I could have just gone to download software. That's really the right link to go to anyhow. So here's where you see download links for the various different operating systems. So if I go to my chat, there you go. So that's your tour of MuseScore 3.1. There's a lot more. I mean, those are the sort of the big items. There's a few little, feature enhancements here and there also, and also just tons of bug fixes. In particular, some of the areas that were the most problematic so far in MuseScore 3, we've had problems with cross-staff notation, which, for example, in my score reunion, passages like this is called cross-staff notation, and oops, this thing I haven't adjusted here. Ooh, but I get to show that, oh, I can't move it. This is actually attached to the wrong staff is the problem, and that's just because that's how I did it when I originally did this in MuseScore 1. I've done it differently if I were doing it today. Anyhow, so this idea that you can have a single passage here span from the bass clef to the treble clef staff in the piano. MuseScore has always supported that, but MuseScore 3 definitely had some bugs in that are pretty much fixed at this point. Also things having to do with the bar lines in your score. If you wanted to add double bars, and you also wanted to have this, say I want to connect all the saxophone staves here. That works. Did I get a trumpet? I got a trumpet too. I can go and say don't span. Things like that, I would just say that was glitchy in MuseScore 3.0, and I've really gone in and cleaned a lot of that up so that it's not so glitchy anymore to be playing with bar line settings on scores with multiple staves and parts and things. So all these changes will affect the parts. If you change a bar line and a part, it affects the score, vice versa, exactly as it should have all along. One of the other things is small staves. If you wanted to have one staff small in your score, so for instance, if I wanted to have this staff be small, it's again something that MuseScore has always supported, but we didn't necessarily do a good job of scaling things, and so I went in and sort of cleaned a lot of that up. So the stuff that's really attached to this staff all got small. You'll see the dynamic. Let me undo that. See the dynamic that goes with that, the accent mark here, the crescendo, all these things. When I redo it, you'll see they all got smaller. The things that didn't get smaller are the things that really shouldn't get smaller, because they're what applies to the score as a whole, the tempo markings, the repeat markings, and so forth. So we've really kind of gone through and cleaned up and tried to make things more consistent as far as what happens when you make a staff small. I would say 3.0 was a step backwards from 2.3.2. There were some bugs that were introduced. It's now better because 2.3.2 also had plenty of bugs in how small staves work, and now it should just be overall better. Another area has to do with invisible staves. If you have an invisible staff just for playback in MuseScore 3, it was affecting the layout of your score. It won't anymore. These are some of the maybe some of the bigger general areas of the program that have been improved under the hood. Another huge one that Werner worked really hard on has to do with how triplets and so forth are represented. There's no difference in the feature. However, under the hood, it used to be that we would sort of have to use, if you think back to elementary school math or junior high math, decimals versus fractions. If you think a third is 0.333333333, right? It doesn't ever stop. It's not an exact representation of something. A seventh is worse. It's like 0.14285714285. You can't represent 1/7 exactly as a decimal, but you can represent it exactly as a fraction. So we had all sorts of errors that would creep in with complex combinations of different tuplets because of these rounding off errors, trying to represent things basically as decimals. They weren't really decimals. They were multiples of 480, if you want to get technical. But essentially, it was the difference between decimals being kind of approximate and fractions being really precise. So Werner rewrote a lot of the code that deals with how the durations of notes are represented in MuseScore to make it just smoother and less buggy, and hopefully be less complaints about scores saying that they've been corrupted, which was a common problem having to do with tuplets because of those rounding off errors. So that's so anyhow, yeah, Werner did a ton of work cleaning all that up, and we will hopefully be reaping the rewards of that for some time to come. When MuseScore 3 was released, I started using it, actually right before it was released, I started using it to create a big band score. And I'm more or less finished with this, and so I'm going to send us out. Well, I'll start it playing here. This is a Bill Evans composition entitled My Bells that I've arranged for a jazz quartet, and then I take the same style of arrangement and I apply it to a song from the Fantastics called Soon It's Gonna Rain. So I take all these same chord voicings and structures, and here come the saxophones. So I used MuseScore 3.1 to create, a fairly complete large-scale score, and it's performing like a champ. So if you've been waiting to update to MuseScore 3 until until you hear that it's up to snuff, I think you're going to start hearing really good things about 3.1. So if you haven't downloaded it already, I recommend you go ahead and do so. And I will see you all next week, and look forward to whatever we end up talking about then. See you later.